everybody, this is a two-part video today covering cold weather driving and cold weather storage of your 2020 through 2022 Shelby GT500. This can be applied to any Mustang or even any car for that matter, but I'll be talking some specific items regarding the Shelby GT500. Here we go, thanks for watching. First up, cold weather driving. So these are not the greatest cold climate cars. As we know, they're monsters. You got a 760 horsepower V8 front engine car with rear wheel drive and summer tires. I see confusion often online where people are giving advice about temperatures for this car. So the Shelby supplement and the owner's manual that comes with these cars has a temperature of 45 degrees listed. People are often advising others that this is due to tire cracking. This is incorrect. 45 degrees is simply due to loss of traction. To quote the supplement, it says, "We do not recommend using original equipment tires when temperatures drop below 45 degrees Fahrenheit, 7 degrees C, or in snow and ice conditions. In these conditions, winter tires or all-season tires are better suited for a car like this when you're below 45 degrees. Michelin has a minimum listed temperature of 20 degrees for the 4S tires, which come on the base model. Note, tires exposed to temperatures of 20 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 7 degrees C or lower must be permitted to gradually return to temperatures of at least 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees C, for at least 24 hours before they are flexed in any manner, such as adjusting inflation pressures, mounting them on wheels, or using them to support, roll, or drive a vehicle." Michelin doesn't specifically list this 20 degrees C minimum temperature for the Sport Cup 2s found on the carbon fiber track pack, but they have a generic statement that basically says all summer performance-based tires are limited to 20 degrees Celsius minimum. My first track day in this car was in winter, actually. It was a January, February day. I booked in advance, and it just so happened that when I went out on track for the very first session in this car, it was 32 degrees. I was obviously concerned about temperatures and traction, but after a couple, I think I did a couple, 2-3 warm-up laps, tires got up to temperature, and despite the track being cold, I actually had better traction than I expected. So talking a bit about Ford's number, which I think is arbitrary, 45 degrees. It's not like you have all the traction down to 45 degrees and then none of the traction below that. These are summer performance tires, so anything less than, a nice warm summer day, you're gonna have less traction. It degrades as the temperature drops. Anything from probably mid-70s is a rough estimate, all the way down. When you're in the 60s, you're gonna have reduced traction, 50s even more so, 40 more so, 30 more so. So it's not like you're good down to 45 and then not good. It's just a number that Ford put in the supplement. Along with cold driving, I'm gonna talk briefly about wet driving. You're looking at my Sport Cup 2s. I think these have had one track day on them maybe. These tires don't come with a lot of traction from the factory, very little tread depth. Even when new, they're not the greatest wet tires. So hydroplaning is a strong possibility. They're wide. These are 315s in the back. I actually run 315 square. But big, wide tires with low tread depth, not good for wet. So if you find yourself out in the rain, the 4S tires are much better for wet. Sport Cup 2s, be careful. And if they've got some wear on them, you're not going to have much tread left at all. Take it real easy. So that's it on cold weather driving for these crazy cars. Don't be that guy that leaves a Cars and Coffee some chilly morning, slides sideways and ends up hitting something. You have big power, reduced traction, drive per the conditions. So up next is cold weather storage for these cars. I live in Texas. My climate is much warmer than, say, somebody in Canada. My storage, I don't really do cold weather storage here. I'm doing more just kind of collector storage. It'll be a little bit different for somebody in Canada or, northern US that has long-term winter storage. I'll be covering what I do in my climate-controlled garage with a dehumidifier versus what somebody might do in a traditional 2-3 car garage that's not climate-controlled versus somebody who might be storing their car outside. I'll give you some tips, tricks, some pros and cons, different ways you can go about things, and talk about storage. So here we go. First up, get the car good and clean before you put it in storage. If you have water spots or bird crap on the paint, neither of those are good for longer term storage. A good coat of wax is good before you put the car into storage. And if you're going to cover the car with a cover, you're going to want a nice clean surface so you don't have grime, dirt, kind of rubbing into the paint with the car cover. Next up, oil change. Some people like to change the oil before they put the car in storage. Some change it when they take the car out of storage. Some do both. I don't really do either because I'm not storing my drivers. I'm driving them year round. In my cars that sit for a while, I'll let oil sit in those for quite a while, but some don't like to have oil sit in the cars, especially when the climate's changing, warm, cold. You can end up with condensation in the oil pan. Next up, fuel level. Two schools of thought here. One is to fill the tank full, prevent condensation from forming in the tank. The other school of thought is to keep the tank as empty as possible so you don't have a bunch of old gas in the tank. I choose the little to no fuel in the cars that don't drive here, but I'm running a dehumidifier, and my garage is climate controlled. I don't have big temperature swings in my garage. If my car was parked outside, I would definitely fill the tank, put some stabilizer in there. If my car was in a traditional 2-3 car garage with no heat, no climate control, no dehumidifying, it would depend on how long my winter was. Up north in Canada area, Minnesota, I would fill the tank, keep condensation from getting in there. In the southern states, maybe I'd be more inclined to not fill the tank. But regardless, if you choose to have a full tank of gas, know that octane degrades with time. Stabilizer helps, but it still degrades with time. So when you pull these boosted cars out, boosted being supercharged or turbocharged, when you pull these cars out of storage in the spring, absolutely avoid boost until you've burned through all the old gas and you have a fresh tank of 93 or 91 in there. We always see every spring, Terminator crowd, GT500 crowd, boosted cars in general, people having engine damage due to detonation of old octane gas, and they're getting into boost right out of storage. In order to add a fuel stabilizer to your tank, you're going to need to use this funnel. It's found in your trunk, opens up the flapper, inserts the filler neck, and allows you to pour in bottles of content into your fuel tank. All right, talking coolant. If you've got the factory fill, nothing to worry about. It's designed to protect everything and not freeze, even in super cold climates. But if you've changed your coolant to water ratio for better cooling, we've seen this through the years in the Terminator crowd as well as the GT500 crowd. A lot of the drag racers will want to run just straight water for better cooling for their intercooler heat exchanger system. You've got to remember that is not freezing compatible. So each spring we see posts online where people say, hey, my intercooler is leaking. Well, guess what? You did that to yourself with having water in there. Make sure you have a proper coolant mix. All right, this takes us to the battery. As you can see here, I have a permanent lead tied in with my battery there. Every time I park this car, I plug in my battery tender. If you're going to be parking this car for any length of time, these cars use battery power. They will eventually go into deep sleep mode, but they use battery power. better for battery health to keep a maintainer or a trickle charger on these cars, and it's critical when you put these into storage. If you're going to park the car outside, where you don't have access to an outlet, a plug, you don't want to use an extension cord, removing the battery would be a better option than just letting the battery sit in the car connected. You can always remove the negative battery cable. I would personally take the battery inside to where it's not so exposed to harsh conditions. But a battery tender / trickle charger is a good idea. Storing these cars on prepared surface, concrete, asphalt, much better than storing them over grass, dirt. Putting a tarp down would help with moisture underneath the car, but obviously not needed if you're in a garage. But from a collector standpoint, longer term corrosion control, I highly recommend not parking these cars over dirt or grass. All right, two schools of thought again. Starting driving the vehicle once in a while versus just letting it sit. Pros and cons. So if you run it every once in a while, that's a good thing for a car to run it periodically, but not so good if you're just gonna start it up, get moisture in the exhaust, not blow it out, not run it, not get the engine up to temperature. You're just gonna create condensation issues and rust issues potentially. Me personally, I just let my cars sit. I don't start them. I've gone 3 years between starting some of my vehicles. And this I wouldn't say depends on the climate, north or south. It's just kind of your personal preference and your ease of use. If you're in a place where you have some pretty harsh winter and you're locked down for a long time, you're not going to be able to, drive it down the street. If you're kind of in middle America where you may have some salt-free, clear days, you may want to take the car for a drive. That's a good strategy. If you do choose to start your car once every couple of weeks or once a month, make sure you get it up to temperature. Check your gauge on the dash there, get it up to operating temperature. Give it some revs to blow out any moisture that accumulates in the exhaust, and you should be fine. I choose to just kind of let my car sit, and then I start them up, pulling them out of storage. If you decide to go the engine running or driving option, don't forget to turn on your air conditioning, get that circulating and lubricating the system. That's good for it. Parking brake, e-brake, emergency brake. Don't use it when you're putting your car in storage. The pads, depending on how long the car is going to sit there, the pads can actually fuse to the rotor, so don't use your parking brake. Next up is tire care, more specifically flat spotting. So modern tires are more resistant to flat spotting than older tires are. They shouldn't flat spot. Again, it kind of depends on how long you're going to let them sit. If the car's going to sit for a while, it might be a great idea to get the tires off the ground, jack up the car, put it on jack stands, get that pressure off where the car sits with the weight. Overinflating the tires helps. Be mindful of the max pressure. I think the Sport Cup 2s say max pressure of 40 PSI right there. Inflate them up to 40 PSI, and then obviously check your pressures before recommissioning your car on the spring. But you can always drive the cars around. My cars that sit quite a bit, like over there is a Terminator that sits. I'll push that car around a little bit. Same with some of the other cars that just kind of sit for months or years. I'll roll them around a little bit, help avoid the flat spotting. In the upper corner is a link to how to move these cars around with the engine off. Next up, critter control. Mice, rats, other pests. You don't want them getting in your garage, into your car. They like to climb up through exhaust ports that we're looking at here, air intakes, into the engine bay. They can chew on wires. You basically want to keep your car rodent proof. You can seal off the exhaust entry points here for mice. Steel wool works. You can put rags in there, whatever it is. Just remember to remove them in the spring. Same with air intakes. You can seal that off. Mothballs are helpful. Peppermint oil, I've read, can help. You can put peppermint oil on cotton swabs, something, just kind of spread it around the outside of the car, and it's supposed to ward off the rodents. It's also not a bad idea to put out mouse traps and poison if you don't have any pets like cats or something that are running around in the garage. Just be mindful of any critters that eat the poison and die, can start to stink. Make sure they're not in the engine bay. Do a good inspection before you start driving the car again. Last up on the storage topic is insurance. Your insurance company may give you a break if the car is put in longer term storage, taken off the road, so check with your provider, see if you can get a discount. So that covers winter storage. Now let's talk about taking the car out of storage or recommissioning the car. Everything you did to put it in storage, basically got to undo it, take it out of storage. Make sure you give the car a good inspection. Check your exhaust plugs, intake plugs, give a good inspection under the hood for any rodents, mice, debris, nests, which could be a fire hazard. Check your tire inflation if you pump those up again or if they've gone down quite a bit in pressure. Make sure you get those back to proper driving pressure. Your fluids. Don't forget to check the coolant. If your intercooler coolant went down, check for cracks, leaking. If you want to change your engine oil, now's a great time to change it before the driving season. Just give the car a good once over all around, check underneath, make sure there's nothing hidden around there, and go back to driving and having fun. Well, that's it on cold weather driving and cold weather storage for the 2020 through 2022 Shelby GT500. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.